What is up? What is up? So today we're going to go over how to make two color decals such as this one. The same method applies for multicolored decals. So you can go as many colors as you want. The same method will work. So first things first, you got to draw up your design on the computer, and let's go do that now. Alright, so bear with me. I don't have screen capture software, so this is what we're going to do, just the camera pointing at the screen. But this next technique is going to vary depending on what your design is. If you're drawing up a custom design, you're going to want to plan out your design to make it easier to layer. You'll get used to it. You'll figure out what works, what doesn't. But for this, we're going to do a simple text design. We're going to keep it easy for your first one, and it'll give you the gist of everything you need to know. So I've already, written out my text, basically. As you can see here, my software likes to make the O's solid. But if you click up here to see what's actually going to cut, it's actually going to cut out the circles of the O. So I know it looks like they're not when you go back to this way, but it is. So basically you want to take your design, keep everything exactly where it's at. So when you're doing two color decals, you're doing a technique called layering. You're essentially cutting everything on different colored sheets of vinyl, picking it up off one sheet and laying it over top of the other. So in order to do that and keep everything lined up perfectly, you need some sort of reference point. So I use squares. Some people use diamonds. You can use most shapes. Something with hard corners that you can easily line up though. So I take a square. Basically, you're going to want to work on square sizes. You don't want them too big. You don't want them too small. So kind of figure out a size that works for you. And what you want to do is go above your work. Leave enough room in between the square and the work so you can cut out your decal once the transfer tape is on. So make sure it's high enough above so it doesn't get in the way. Basically what you're going to want to do is just put two squares. So what I do is I reference where my square is on the y-axis, and I make sure, so this first one, I don't know if you can see, this first one on the y-axis is 1.308. So I want to make sure this one is 1.308. That just makes sure that visually when you go to put them together later, your eye's not going to be messing with you, seeing one that's a little bit off of the other. So once they're both in the same spot, what I like to do is I like to put a weeding line around it, depending on whether or not your software does this. So what the weeding line is as you can see, it just cuts around the actual object you're cutting out in its entirety. That way it's less weeding for you. You can rip off the full sheet and then you can come back and do your detailed weeding and you're not worried about pulling letters off or any of that. Now I'm actually going to scale this up to a larger size before I cut it. That's the size decal I want. Like I said, this will work with any size, but now I got to take my squares back down to a more manageable size. Probably about 1.5 inches, I'd say. Alright. Now when I'm doing large decals like this, I tend to do them one at a time in case, I screw up, because you can screw up a whole sheet. But if you're doing little stuff, you can do this exact same technique for multiple decals at once. Just keep your squares up at the top here, and it'll keep all of these in line. But bear in mind, if you're just a little bit off when we're layering that square, it's going to exponentially grow as you get towards the bottom. So if you're just a little bit cockeyed, this bottom one over here is going to be way too far off. So until you get good at it, I'd stick with doing just one at a time. Practice, practice, practice. And then once you get good, you can layer multiples at a time. So I'm now going to load my vinyl. Now it really shouldn't matter which color you use first, unless you came up with some really weird design that requires you're actually laying colors over top of each other. I don't recommend that. So I'm going to start with the white first, but like I said, it doesn't matter. You should by now know how to load your machine if you're trying to do two color decals, but if not, I like to set it in. I have all these reference points here, so to make sure you're straight, you want to get just enough of the blade that you're not going to go past when you're cutting your design, but you want to be far enough over you can use the full width of your vinyl. So I make sure that my end cut here is really straight, so all I have to really do is line it up with one of these straight lines on here. This is the US cutters. This is the SC 34-inch cutter. Just make sure your vinyl's straight, lined up. Make sure it's locked in place, and you're good to go. So depending on your software, this technique is going to be either the same as mine or different. I'm using Sure Cuts a Lot Pro. So I'm going to go to Cut. Now over here, you'll see my design down here. You have an option to cut by color. If you don't have this option, you're going to have to come back to your design. So say you want to just cut the white right now. What you're going to have to do is come in and essentially select the blue, delete it. This is all layered together, so hold on. So you're going to have to essentially select the blue, delete it, leave everything else in play, cut it, come back, put the blue back, delete the white, and you know, that's the hard way of doing it. Luckily, they came up with an easy way, and essentially this thing will do it by itself. So basically, so my software, I come in, I see my design down here. You can either cut general or cut by color. I want to cut by color. So I want to keep every single color except for the blue. So what I'm keeping here is I'm keeping my weeding line, which is going around. I'm keeping my work and the it, which are going to be white. Obviously they're black on screen because you wouldn't see if it was white. And then I'm keeping my reference squares that I'm going to use to layer. Let's go ahead and hit cut and we'll take it from there. Those are what my settings are set at. Every machine's going to be different. I cut only Oracle 651 vinyl. We'll go ahead and cut our white. To make sure you get a straight cut, I always like to line my vinyl up on both sides with these reference marks that they give you. So you know, I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 over here. I go 4 over in the back. Lock it back down. And slice it around, cutting it. So now we'll load in our teal. Remember, always leave, I mean, I guess depending on the machine, but with my machine, you got to leave it on when you're loading your different colors or any kind of vinyl, because the blade drops when the machine shuts off. So if you try and slide your vinyl in, you're going to cut along that edge wherever it runs under the blade. So I run my teal in, lock it down. Another thing I like to do is turn the machine off and back on in between cuts. That way it erases any memory it has of the last cut, and you're starting fresh. So now we're back over on the computer. We're going to go back to cut. Once again, we're leaving everything in place. This is important. Back to cut. Now what we want to cut is just the blue, as well as our weeding line again, and our squares. So you'll see here, we've deselected the black because we no longer want that color. Then we're going to come back in and we're going to cut just our blue, our squares, and our weeding line. So once again, we hit cut. Alright, so we're ready to start weeding. Here's where you're going to see the benefit of adding that weeding line to it. So we're going to take our corner. This is hard to do with the camera right in front of me. Peel it up. So it works, you know, it's more important when you have actually a large batch or a larger design, or, you know, more intricate design with more waste. But we'll come through, we'll weed out our 4. Take out the center of the O. Okay. The 4 is done. Now Now we need the work and the it. Same thing. Use our weeding line, come through. Take out the center of the O. All right, that's a simple design, so it's easy to weed. So let's get to the next step. So something to keep in mind, if you're using a cheaper vinyl, the white on the cheaper vinyl has a white background. With this Oracle 651, they put a blue background so you can actually see the squares. So if you're using cheap vinyl, which I don't recommend, you're gonna wanna make sure you layer with your white first and layer the white color on top of another color. Otherwise, you're gonna have a hard time lining up your squares. So what we're basically gonna be doing is we're gonna apply our transfer tape onto our first color, peeling it up, and then using our squares that we added, we're gonna line those squares up with the squares on our second color, and it's essentially gonna lay down our first color exactly where we want it on the whole design. I have a transfer tape roller and all that, but this is quick and dirty, so this is how we're gonna do it. I like to stick it onto the end of the table. Gives me a nice piece to grasp onto. Slide my piece in. It's important you lay your transfer tape down right, because any weird imperfection or bubble is gonna show up and it's gonna screw up your layering process. All right. Now remember, this transfer tape is going to become the final transfer tape, so take care of it. You don't get to switch it out at the end. Okay, now this part's important, and it's going to help you. So you're going to peel back your design as if you're going to apply it. Make sure it's laying nice and flat, and take the backing paper, line it up on your design, but make sure that no backing paper is on your squares. We want the squares to stick. We don't want anything else to stick yet, so make sure that your squares are off of the backing paper. So all you're gonna have is just that on it. And you take your second piece here, lay it down flat. There's other ways you can do this. If you're nervous, see if I have some lying around. If you're worried about it and it's your first time and your paper is, you know, on a small piece, so it's on the roll, it's gonna have a curve to it. So what you can do to make it easier is you can put a couple pieces of tape down to help hold your design flat. Because if there's any weird bow in this or a weird curve, these squares aren't going to line up with these squares because it's going to be bent or something's going to be off. You want this flat, so when you take your next piece and lay it over top, the squares actually line up. Because this is going to be it with our transfer tape here. So what you're just going to do is line up both the squares directly on top of each other. Don't just press one side down. You know, get one side lined up, keep an eye on the other side, and kind of do a little back and forth until you get it just right. And then at that point, when they're both lined up perfectly, lay them down. Then I like to come through, hit the top with our squeegee. And what you're basically going to do is fold this over and then slowly work its way back and let it just drop nicely in place. Come through, squeegee it again. And there you have it. You've got a nice two-colored layered piece. You see how nicely the one square laid directly on top of the other. If you're off a little bit, you're going to notice it in your design. So you'll see how well these edges line up with each other because of that. So all that's left now is to trim your design into a sellable decal. And you're done. If you have any more questions or you would like to see something else demonstrated, just go ahead and leave it in the comments and I'll try and get everything answered for you guys and try and make any more videos that can help you guys out. Thanks. Please subscribe.